Well, good morning. This is Pastor Jim Taylor from the Haven Baptist Church, and welcome to the weekly edition of Your Questions Answered. And I try to get out a copy of this every week. The last couple of weeks we've been kind of missing on that. And for those of you that follow along, I deeply apologize. It's been very busy last couple of weeks, so let me make a real quick adjustment here. Yeah, there we go. Now it's not cutting the top of my head off anymore. But this week's edition is going to be special. I'm calling it the special Halloween edition because it is October the 31st here in Korea, and everybody is getting all geared up for Halloween, and so there's been some questions kicked around in the last week as to whether or not Christians ought to celebrate Halloween or not, and so. I fully intend on addressing this in my church tomorrow when I'm preaching in the afternoon service. But I wanted to kind of do a synopsis, kind of a quick, summary today for this. So, without going too much further into that, there's a passage in the book of Job, Job chapter 4, verses 12 through 15. It says, "Now a thing was secretly brought to me, and mine ear received a little thereof. In thoughts from the visions of the night, when deep sleep falleth on men, fear came upon me, and trembling, which made all my bones to shake. Then a spirit passed before my face, and the hair of my flesh stood up." Halloween, October 31st. It's the same day that Martin Luther nailed his 95 Theses to the castle door, and Martin Luther, shares this famous date with Halloween, and yet, if you were to ask somebody, what is special about October 31st, very few people are actually going to say Martin Luther. If they do, then they're probably a Christian, and probably a Christian that's pretty steeped in their history, I guess you'd say. But most people are going to say, well, that's Halloween, it's a time when we dress up our kids as little ghosts and witches and devils and monsters. And yesterday I saw Spider-Man and Iron Man running around with this group. You might even wonder if there really is such a thing as a ghost. And you go back to the scriptures and you read the Bible, and the Bible says when people die, they go to heaven or they go to hell. So they don't kind of hang around here. There's really no such thing as a ghost. And so, reading the passage we read in Job, in verse 15, he says, "Then a spirit passed before my face, the hair of my flesh stood up." And you go, well, that's obviously a ghost. I think what Eliphaz in our text saw was a devil. Just as God is real, so is the devil. And if you've been reading your Bible, you know that Jesus had to face, devils a lot. Paul mentioned having a messenger of Satan to buffet him. He faced a little demon-possessed girl at one point who followed him around. Demonic spirits are very good at giving false messages or false teachings, to unsuspecting people. 1 Timothy 4:1 tells us that the Holy Spirit speaketh expressly that in the latter times some should depart from the faith, giving heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils. And that's in 1 Timothy 4:1. So I think the devil loves to offer people, a package deal, a package deal where it looks fun and exciting, but actually it's not. It's something else. It's something wicked and twisted, but sometimes people don't see that. And I think that Halloween is kind of one of those package deals. I want to kind of touch on several areas here in Halloween, but Deuteronomy chapter 12, verses 30 and 31 says this. It says, "Take heed to thyself, that thou be not snared by following them, after that they be destroyed from before thee, and that thou inquire not after their gods, saying, How did these nations serve their gods? Even so will I do likewise. Thou shalt not do so unto the Lord thy God, for every abomination to the Lord which he hateth have they done unto their gods, for even their sons and their daughters they have burnt in the fire of their gods." As believers, we can't be like them. we have to be different than them. All right. Um, Here's a quote for you from the Satanic Bible, and I need you to pay attention to this. I don't have a Satanic Bible. I did research on this, okay? But it's written by a guy named Anton LaVey, who is the founder of the Church of Satan in America. He is dead now and, burning in hell. And his daughter now runs the church. I forget what her name is. But anyway, he said this. He said, and this is in their Bible, okay, what they follow as a religious thing. And he said, after one's own birthday, the two major satanic holidays are Walpurgisnacht, which is May the 1st, and Halloween. So there you go. In their own writings, that day is very important to them, all right? Americans spend over 8 billion, get that billion, $8 billion a year on Halloween. And why? Because most people believe it's nothing more than just harmless fun. But where did it come from? Well, the history of Halloween, it came from the Celtic Druid cult worship of the false god Samhain, which is, the Lord of the Dead. And the date itself is so ancient, we don't even really know when it started, okay? Among all of the religious dates of the Druids, this day of remembrance from the solstices and the equinoxes, and those relate to the 4 seasons, those were the most important to them. And the most significant one, the one that was most important, was the one for Samhain, which was a celebration at the end of autumn, the beginning of darkness and the beginning of winter, and that sort of thing. And this was an important date to them. And so Samhain occurred on November the 1st, and its eve was October 31st, the time when the celebrating actually began. And so on that night, there was an ancient festival in honor of a Druid deity, which they referred to as the Lord of the Dead. And the Celts believed that on that night, the spiritual world and the physical world drew closest together, and that the souls of the dead could leave their realm and wander into, the earth, the, physical realm. And the Celts saw this night as being a very magical night. And they would light these big, huge bonfires. And they believed that, by the way, did you know bonfire comes from the word bone and fire? There's another little gift for you, right? So they believe that on the eve of this festival, Samhain, the Lord of Death would, call together, all the wicked spirits that have been condemned to inhabit the bodies of animals. And, it gets really weird. But anyway, literal human sacrifices would be offered on these bonfires, and that's why they were called bonfires, to the spirits of the dead. And they, because the spirits of the dead would supposedly visit their earthly families and friends, and so they would offer these sacrifices to them. In time, the Romans conquered the Celts, and we learn, somebody told me that it was actually pronounced Celt. Okay, all right, Celt for you if you want that, Celt for me. I learned in phonics that when C is followed by E, I, or Y, it sounds like an S, okay? So it's Celts to me. And I didn't grow up hearing about the Boston Celtics. So anyway, the Romans conquered the Celts, and then we learned quite a lot about the Celts from the Roman historians who wrote from about 200 BC and onward. And their writings explain a lot to us, okay? For example, did you ever wonder, where do we get this whole going door to door and saying trick or treat thing? Well, that goes back to the Celtic Druids too. They believed that since the dead people returned to visit, that they needed to set out these lavish gifts for their spiritual guests. And often they would perform human sacrifices in these huge fires, and in order to, ward off these spirits. But people feared them, and they thought that the spirits would harm them or even kill them if they didn't keep them happy. So Remember, Samhain was the Lord of the Dead, so their gifts had to please him, or else bad things would happen. And so spirits that were not suitably treated would do bad things, and so trick or treat. Okay. What about jack-o'-lanterns? And I see jack-o'-lanterns every year at this time, and I know there's a lot of Christian people that will make a jack-o'-lantern and set it out in the spirit of the season or whatever. Um, but spirits were believed to be hideous, and they were believed to be frightening, and so the Druids would carve faces into large turnips, and they would place a candle inside this large turnip in order to keep the evil spirit away from their homes. And in time, the turnips, just evolved and were replaced by pumpkins. So that's where the jack-o'-lantern comes from. It's supposed to scare away evil spirits. And then why do we dress up like little witches and devils and ghosts and monsters? Well, the Celtic Druids started that one too. They would dress up to disguise themselves so that the spirits would think that the Druids belonged to their own evil company and therefore not bring any harm to them. So the idea there was that they were just disguising themselves to look like one of the spirits. Okay. So then Christianity comes along and spreads throughout Europe, and many of the Celts were converted. The Catholic priest tried to replace the Celtic pagan holidays with Christian ones, and we know that this was happening. There were several steps in this process, but the most significant is when the Catholic Church created a holiday called All Saints' Day in 610 A.D. To honor martyred saints. Okay, so they got as close to it as possible, but still try to make it sound, religious. And so on that day, it became tradition to go door to door to request small cakes in exchange for prayers for the dead. Who were supposedly in purgatory, which of course purgatory is not spiritual. None of this is spiritual, all right? So this came out of a religious belief in purgatory and that the prayers of the living could influence the outcome somehow of their eternity, which is, totally false. In the 9th century, then you have All Saints' Day being moved from May to November the 1st to replace Samhain, all right? Part of the festivity would include a pageant where people would dress up as one of their favorite departed saints, and some would dress up as the devil. Okay, you gotta have the good guys and bad guys. That makes for a better show, right? An alternate name for All Saints' Day was All Hallows Eve, or All Hallows Day, meaning that the night before that would be All Hallows Eve, which would then be shortened to Halloween. Okay, so the origin of our contemporary Halloween tradition is a mixture of old Celtic pagan rituals, superstition, and various Roman Catholic false teachings. That's where our modern form of Halloween comes from. The English Puritans and some of the other, founding fathers of America refused to even allow Halloween to be celebrated in the colonies because they knew it was a satanic holiday. They said, we're not going to do that here. In fact, Halloween was never really widely celebrated in America until around the 1900s. Okay, everything about Halloween has pagan roots. You've got the bonfires, which, as I said, is a combination of bone and fire. That goes back to the Druid fires where they had human sacrifices. Even the colors, the colors orange and black, they go back to the orange flames that light up the Black Night. Okay, the costumes that people wear go back to dressing up in order to fool the evil spirits. The jack-o'-lanterns, go back to the turnips being carved in an attempt to ward off evil spirits. Even the saying trick and treat, goes back to the pagan belief that spirits would require a gift to be celebrated for the Lord of Death or Samhain. So Halloween is, Halloween's not like Thanksgiving. It's not like Christmas. Thanksgiving and Christmas have, Christian roots and Christian values, and they're known for Christian things. If you ask somebody what's Christmas about, If they're underneath the age of 7, they'll probably say Santa Claus. I get that, and I'm not for that in any way. But most everybody understands Christmas is about the birth of Jesus. But if you ask them about Halloween, they'll tell you, oh, that's the night when we dress up like, supervillains or whatever, and go out and knock on doors and get candy. There's nothing remotely Christian about it. And when you trace it back to his roots, it goes back to all that is wicked and evil in the Celtic Druid religion. So, then Martin Luther comes along, right? October 31st, and gives us an alternative. So let me give you some reasons to avoid Halloween, okay? Halloween is a celebration of devils. And so as a Christian, we should be asking ourselves a question: should a believer have anything to do with Halloween? Well, the short answer is no, but there's a number of reasons why. So, to me, it is so blatantly and unashamedly open about, it's dark, it's satanic. Why would there even be a need to convince believers that it's evil? But, we find ourselves having to go through that. I know of some churches that actually have they call it a fall festival to replace Halloween, where they will, tell their kids to come dressed up as your favorite Bible character, and they'll just try to Christianize Halloween. And I've been asked, is that okay? And my answer is no. I don't think it's okay to, to try to do something somewhat like that. I think the better answer is to teach our kids why we as believers don't do things like that. We teach them why we don't steal. We teach them why we don't lie. We teach them why we don't kill. Why can't we teach them why we don't do that? Anyway, Ephesians 5 verses 11 and 12 says, have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather reprove them, for it's a shame even to speak of those things which are done of them in secret. So believers should have nothing to do with the unfruitful works of darkness. Halloween, I don't care how you dress it up, what you say, how many comments you leave me in the comments block, and I hope you do. But Halloween is filled with the unfruitful works of darkness. It's a celebration of darkness. Remember, whether you want to acknowledge it or not, occultists, Satanists love Halloween. Remember what I read to you from Anton LaVey's writings in his Satanic Bible, where he said the two most, satanic holidays are Walpurgisnacht, May the 1st, and Halloween. Well, the Bible specifically commands us to avoid evil and to avoid even the appearance of evil. 1 Thessalonians 5:22 says, abstain from all appearance of evil. So, parents, when you dress your kids up like little devils and little witches and whatever, you say, but I don't do that. My kid's going out as Spider-Man, or my kid's going out as Iron Man, or whatever. You're sending a false message to your kid that it is okay to be involved in that. And trust me, they're not going to stop at Spider-Man and Iron Man. When they grow up and they, have families of their own, they're going to be teaching your grandkids, how to do Halloween, and it's going to be even bigger than what it was in your home. So stay away from it. Just, stay clear of all appearance of evil. Christian parents ought to be teaching their kids to separate from worldliness, not to try to fit in or enjoy it. James chapter 4 verses 4 and 5 says, ye adulterers and adulteresses, know ye not that friendship with the world is enmity with God? Whosoever therefore will be a friend of the world is the enemy of God. Do you think that the scripture saith in vain, the spirit that dwelleth in us lusteth to envy? There's lots of verses in the Bible on being separated from the world. You say, well, none of them say specifically Halloween, Well, if it's got evil roots, do you think it's not going to qualify? Really? There's a lot of verses in the Old Testament which condemn occultism, and at the same time commands us to avoid them completely. Exodus 22:18, thou shalt not suffer a witch to live. And, there are Christian parents that are going to dress their little girls up like little witches. Leviticus 19:31, regard not them that have familiar spirits, neither seek after wizards to be defiled by them. I am the Lord your God. And there's going to be little Harry Potters running around all over the place, little wizards. There's going to be, kids dressed up as ghosts running out and running around all over the place. and yet God says we're not supposed to have anything to do with that. 1 Chronicles chapter 10, verses 13 and 14. So Saul died for his transgression, which he committed against the Lord, even against the word of the Lord, which he kept not, and also for asking counsel of one that had a familiar spirit to inquire of it, and inquired not of the Lord. Therefore he slew him, and turned the kingdom unto David the son of Jesse. So I hope you picked that up. Saul actually died because he went to the witch of Endor, who brought up asking counsel of one that had a familiar spirit to inquire of it. And so he should have been talking to the Lord, but instead he did that, and so God killed him. All right. Deuteronomy 18, verses 9 through 14. Sorry, I had to get a sip of coffee. For me, it's not even 7 o'clock in the morning yet. Okay. You kind of get an early start to do these things. But anyway, Deuteronomy 18, verses 9 through 14 says this: When thou art come into the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee, thou shalt not learn to do after their abominations of those nations. There shall not be found among you anyone that maketh his son or daughter to pass through the fire. To me, I just can't imagine that. They were sacrificing their children in the fire. Or that useth divination, magic, or observeth times, or an enchanter, or a witch, or a charmer, or a consulter with familiar spirits, or a wizard, or a necromancer. Necromancer, those are the ones that, their focus is on the dead, right? Necromancy. For all that do these things are an abomination unto the Lord, and because these abominations the Lord thy God will drive them out from before thee. Thou shalt be perfect with the Lord thy God, for these nations which thou shalt possess hearkened unto observers of times, unto diviners, but as for thee, the Lord thy God hath not suffered thee so to do. So as a child of God, you're not supposed to have anything to do with that, okay? To stay away from it. Halloween is representative of wickedness. It's a host of abominable practices that are condemned by God. And don't tell me it's different now. An evil tree doesn't produce good fruit. Jesus told us this. Those that practice Halloween are representing those abominable practices, even if you dress your kids up like a cowboy instead of a vampire, okay? The costume doesn't make Halloween evil. Rather, Halloween makes the costume evil, okay? Or it dictates that the person wearing the costume is, doing something that goes back to that which is evil. We're not supposed to be like the world, okay? You remember that. However, Christian, somebody's going to come knocking at your door. Some little kid is going to look up at you and say, "Twick or tweet." And so how do you handle that? I'm a Christian and I don't do this stuff. Slam the door. Go away, kid. You bother me. It's going to happen. So why not use it as an opportunity to evangelize? Get yourself some decent little gospel tracts for kids and some for adults, because many kids will be, attended with an adult. Maybe a little bag of candy to put the gospel tract in and say, and they come say trick or treat, give them the bag of candy with the tract in it and say, well, here, I hope you enjoy this candy and I'd like you to read this. This is important, and give that to them. And don't get the ones that, don't do, Halloween, it's wicked and evil, so don't come back next year. Don't get that one. Don't get that tract, okay? That's going to turn them off immediately. Get the one that is, God's simple plan of salvation or something like that. And that'll be very effective, okay? I could have told you a lot more. You'd be shocked if I told you about the sexual deviancy and the gruesome details of the kind of worship that the Druids or the witches went into, or even the Satanists of our day. You would be repulsed. You would be sickened. You would be shocked. And Halloween's a special day to them. So Christian, don't make it a special day to you, okay? So kind of beat up on Halloween a little bit. And now I want to get to the first question here.